Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the press conference following the meeting between the President of the European Commission, NATO Secretary General and Prime Minister of Latvia. We will start the press conference now with a statement of the Prime Minister of Latvia.
Paldies, dear Ursula, dear Jens, once again, welcome to Riga.
Today we had a very important meeting. We have the President of the European Commission and NATO Secretary General in Riga at the same time, and that is why it is important. It is also important because Europe is currently facing unprecedented threats, multiple threats at the same time, and those threats are linked between each other. We have hybrid attacks on the border of Lithuanian, Polish, Latvian border, on the EU's external border, where migrants are being illegally pushed over the European Union external border, and Lithuania, Latvia and Poland have been defending the EU's external border, has committed resources to the security of the EU external border. We have common shared policy which is also shared and supported by our partners in European Union and NATO. Another challenge that our region is currently facing is the pooling of the Russian military resources near the Ukrainian border. This pooling or movement of the troops is nothing planned, as we witnessed in spring and summer when planned training took place. This is not planned, and therefore EU and NATO must very closely monitor these developments and should send Russia a clear signal that any attempts to escalate the situation will not be unanswered. And then we also have the energy price hike. In case of Europe, we are mostly talking about gas price increase, which is artificial. Gazprom or Russia owns in Germany and Austria gas storage facilities, and although Gazprom is meeting its obligations under the contracts with Europe, Gazprom has left its gas storage facilities nearly empty, creating an artificial deficit which drives the prices up. And then we also are faced with a huge disinformation flow, which is very aggressive and very intense from Russia against currently Poland and the hybrid situation on the Belarusian border, and the attempts to blame Latvia, Lithuania, Poland instead of Belarus is, of course, part of the disinformation, part of false narrative, and we also hear claims that Ukraine is provoking Russia, while there is nothing to provoke Russia in Ukraine's behavior, and Russia is merely pooling its military resources by the Ukrainian border. It is very important for the European Union and NATO member states to stick together, to remain united, and if Russia or Belarus thinks that such threats or such attacks would divide either EU member states or NATO member states, they're wrong. It's just the opposite. We are consolidating our resources, our efforts, and our ranks, and this is indeed a very important visit for us because it allows us to exchange the information with our colleagues in EU and NATO, and we continue to cooperate and exchange information on a regular basis. It's very important that European Union and NATO stand here today together because they are the guarantor of our security and our safety. So once again, thank you for the visit. You're always welcome in Latvia, by the way. And thank you for a very constructive meeting and dialogue. Visits of this kind or the dialogue at this level is very important at times like these. Thank you. Thank you. The floor is given to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister dear Krišjānis. I'm very happy to be here today in Riga together with Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg. I want to assure you here of the EU's full solidarity with Latvia, Poland and Lithuania in these challenging times. For months now, Latvia has been facing a deliberate, a cynical and a hybrid attack, an attack that has been organized by the Lukashenko regime. And this attack is putting at risk the life of innocent civilians lured to Belarus under false promises. Latvia has been responding to this hybrid attack in a humane way, at the same time in a very firm way. And the European Union continues to stand by your side. This is very important for us. This includes, for example, the equipment support to help manage the border efficiently, in close cooperation with our agencies that are here on the ground. This is Frontex, it is EASO, it is Europol. And as I've announced already last week, we are tripling now the EU border management funding for Latvia, Poland and Lithuania to 200 million euros overall this year and next year. Lukashenko has failed in his bid to undermine EU unity and solidarity. And we are facing down his hybrid attack altogether. But it is important for us also to learn our lessons from what we are witnessing right now, because we see that to deflect away from their internal problems, our opponents do not shy away from waging hybrid attacks on us. And these attacks can, that's why we call them hybrid, take multiple forms. A strong component is disinformation to stoke tensions within the society. We've seen that also during the pandemic. The amount of misinformation, we see that during elections. And I'm very grateful that afterwards we're going to go to the Strategic Communication Center to deep dive into that topic with the experience from both sides, NATO and the European Union. We've seen cyber attacks. It's a classical mean order also for hybrid attacks against individuals, institutions, and infrastructure. And this is putting directly lives at risk. Or in the current situation where we see that human beings are being instrumentalized for political purposes. And therefore, our message is very clear that EU and NATO work hand in hand to counter these kinds of hybrid attacks. We are together testing and coordinating our crisis response during regular exercises, and we are stepping up our cooperation, be it in the resilience, be it in the situational awareness, or be it in fighting disinformation. Let me shed a short look at the resilience component. We have just issued our Security Union strategy, and there we are assessing our capacities and assets to respond to these kind of hybrid threats. It is in this regard that the European Union has solid tools covering the different sectors. If we look at the situation at the border, EU border with Belarus, we have mobilized all our diplomatic power reaching out to our partners, but also to the countries of origin. This has been very successful to convince them to take responsibility for their population not to be trapped in Belarus. We have made use of sanctions against individuals and authorities involved in these hybrid attacks, and we are very closely coordinating our sanctions with the United Kingdom, with the United States, and with Canada. So we do have efficient tools. If we look at the second point, that is the situational awareness, we are convinced that to be able to take appropriate decisions and to act in a timely and effective manner, we need proper information and analysis capacity all over the European Union. And this is why the European Union needs an own joint situational awareness center. Such a center would help the European Union to bundle its expertise and its know-how, for example, in countering these kinds of hybrid attacks. And finally, the topic of disinformation. This is a good example for the very efficient cooperation between the European Union and NATO. Our staff are in constant contact what disinformation is concerned to prevent the spread of these falsities and to block foreign interferences. NATO is, for example, connected to the EU's rapid alert system. So we constantly exchange our knowledge, and we have very successfully conducted joint outreach and campaigns, especially to debunk propaganda in our neighborhood. But as hybrid threats are getting more acute, we need to take our cooperation to the next level. And this is why we, Secretary General of NATO and the Commission, we are working together on a new EU-NATO joint declaration then put forward to the leaders. Our goal is to renew this joint declaration, to update it, and to have a very strong commitment to a strong EU-NATO partnership within this joint declaration. We stand united with Latvia, and I would want to thank you again for having us hosted here today. Thank you.
Paldies, un uz vārds NATO ģenerālsekretāram.
And now the floor is given to the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg.
Prime Minister Kariņš, Krišjānis, it's always a great pleasure to be in Riga, to be in Latvia, but especially tonight because I'm here together with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and that demonstrates the unity, the high level of cooperation between NATO and the European Union in facing the challenges we see now on the border of Belarus, but also in and around Ukraine. So therefore, I think it is very timely that we are here together today. Let me start by recognizing the many valuable contributions Latvia makes to NATO, to our shared security, including contributions to our different NATO missions and operations and exercises, and also with investments in key capabilities, and with expertise in countering disinformation. And we also very much welcome the fact that you have, for now several years, spent more than 2% of GDP on defense. Today we will visit the Center of Excellence, which focuses on disinformation. We will be briefed on this important work. We will be joined by the director of the European Center for Countering Hybrid Threats, based in Helsinki, and the director of the NATO Cyber Defense Center, based in Tallinn. NATO is strongly committed to Latvia's security, including through the presence of our multinational battle group in Adasi, where 10 allies serve alongside Latvian forces to deter aggression and preserve peace. I look forward to visit our NATO battle group tomorrow. We just had a substantive discussion on current security challenges in the region, including the Belarusian regime's cynical and inhumane exploitation of vulnerable people, which aims to put pressure on neighboring countries. We stand in full solidarity with Latvia and all the other directly affected allies. And we keep in contact with partner countries that may be used for transit. We also discussed Russia's unexplained and unjustified military buildup near Ukraine. We call on Russia to be transparent, reduce tensions and de-escalate. NATO remains vigilant. We stand ready to defend all allies, and we will continue to provide our partner Ukraine with political and practical support. And we will meet the foreign ministers of Ukraine and Georgia here in Riga at our NATO foreign ministerial meeting this week. It is important for me to be here with President von der Leyen, because NATO and the European Union are unique and essential partners, and we are working together, and that makes us all stronger. Our cooperation has already reached unprecedented levels, including on cyber, maritime security and building stability in the Western Balkans. And we are looking into what more we could do together. And also, as President von der Leyen mentioned, we are now working on a new joint declaration from the EU and NATO. NATO foreign ministers will meet here in Riga on Tuesday and on Wednesday, and our discussions will help to strengthen our alliance in a more dangerous and competitive world. So I think the message is that in uncertain times and in challenging times, it's even more important that we have big and strong institutions like NATO and like the European Union, and that we are demonstrating our ability to work together. So once again, thank you so much for hosting us tonight.
Paldies. Mums ir laiks pāris jautājumiem.
Thank you, and we have time for a couple of questions when asking a question. Please do use the microphone on the stand so that it can be interpreted, and please also mention who you are and to whom you would like to address the question. Please,
hello.
your name is?
Gints Amoliņš, Latvian Public Television. I would have a question to President of the European Commission and Latvian Prime Minister. In this case, you mentioned that the EU is providing support to the Baltic states and Poland in regards on border defense and strengthening the border. Did you discuss also, as you know, there's been discussions about should the EU fund also fence building? You mentioned there's equipment support. So what kind of equipment support is there from the EU to Latvia, Lithuania and Poland? And did you also discuss the fence issue? Thank you.
We discussed the whole width of support that the European Union can offer precisely here to Latvia. So first of all, we increase the funding, and it's for everything where border management is concerned. You have a very long border, and the management, for example, has to be with electronic means. So whatever electronic equipment is necessary, including also, for example, drones, would be facilitating the management of the border. Same goes for patrol vehicles, for example, or the whole equipment border guards would need. And this, of course, includes Frontex, or it of course includes Europol and the work of EASO. So there's a whole width of topics that can be funded by which we support Latvia.
Jā, paldies. Jebkurā gadījumā.
Yes, thank you. Our country has a number of needs when it comes to the security of our border with Belarus, and the fence, which is being installed, is one of the solutions here. But in terms of costs, we need to invest much more in technologies, devices, and various kinds of equipment. And we will continue the dialogue with other member states in the European Commission on the best ways of strengthening the external border of the European Union with Belarus. Be it as it may, Latvia will continue or will find ways to invest the European Union funding efficiently, because we have a great list of needs and areas in which to invest. We still have time for one more question.
Thank you. Secretary General, the President of Lithuania urged NATO to change its stance towards Belarus, to toughen its stance towards Belarus, and he gave us a reason that Belarusian military is getting more and more integrated with the Russian forces. What is your comment on that? Will you toughen NATO's stance? Prime Minister Kariņš, do you go along with the Lithuanian demand? And a question to President von der Leyen. The Omicron variant of the coronavirus has reached Europe. We have seen several cases in several countries. Can you tell us what your next steps will be to mitigate the impact of this variant on Europe? And if I may, what does that mean for the vaccine orders the European Union has? Does the European Union have to adapt these orders? When do you expect to see adapted vaccines, or is that already in the contracts? Thank you.
President von der Leyen and I, we just came from Lithuania. We had a meeting there earlier today, and we discussed, of course, also the situation along the border with Belarus and the developments in Belarus and the Lukashenko regime's irresponsible and inhumane behavior, using vulnerable migrants as a tool to put pressure on neighbor countries. NATO has also provided some direct support to Lithuania by sending some experts to help them to deal with the situation they face on the border and the hybrid tactics that Belarus is using against Lithuania and also other countries in this region. NATO has also, of course, strongly condemned the behavior of the Lukashenko regime. We have, over the last years, significantly increased our presence in this region. For the first time in our history, we have combated the battle groups in the Baltic region, including one in Latvia and the one in Lithuania, and I will visit the one in Latvia tomorrow. And then we have also air policing. We have increased naval presence, so both on land, in the air, and at sea, there is more NATO now. And then we are, of course, constantly assessing our posture and any need to further adjust our posture. But I think what we face now is both the challenges on the border with Belarus, but also, of course, the military unusual concentration of Russian forces close to Ukraine. And NATO is vigilant. NATO is closely monitoring, collecting information, and are constantly and actively assessing what is needed to be done to make sure that all allies are safe and that we send a clear message that NATO is there to protect and defend all allies against any potential threat.
Thank you for the question. I think that Secretary General already described quite eloquently how NATO helps the region and Latvia in particular. While we are standing here, our armed forces are working shoulder to shoulder, side by side with 10 other allied nations that are a part of our battle group, EFP battle group, and our armed forces, our mechanized infantry brigade is very closely integrated with the NATO battle group, and again working side by side in very close coordination. However, generally speaking, if we take regional threats coming not only from Belarus but also from the border area between the Ukraine and Russia, looking at these threats, we do feel concerns, and we would think that, or we assume that NATO should further increase its presence here in the Baltics given those threats.
So, completely different topic on the Omicron. We take this Omicron variant very serious, and we know that we are now in a race against time. Why that? Because we know not all about this variant, but it is a variant of concern. And the scientists and manufacturers need 2 to 3 weeks to have a full picture about the quality of the mutations of this Omicron variant. And therefore, we really have to use this time because there are precautionary actions we can take. First and foremost, highest priority is vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. Boost, boost, boost as much as is possible, because this boosting or vaccination raises the level of antibodies and stimulates the memory cells for COVID viruses. Therefore, this is the police of the immune system that you are reinforcing during that time. The second point is the very simple measures: masks, hand hygiene, and social distancing, because no matter what the variant is, this is helping against the variant. And we need to buy time. And then, of course, sequencing and contact tracing if we see infections. Now, very important is also that, relating to your question, what the vaccine order is concerned. You might recall that in summer, the Commission concluded a third contract with BioNTech Pfizer, including 1.8 billion doses of vaccines. And we have this order placed. There are options we can trigger. So on that front, we are on the safe side. In the contract, there's also a certain clause included that if a variant turns into an escape variant, so a difficult variant, BioNTech Pfizer is able to adapt its vaccine within 100 days. Therefore, the general line is hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And highest priority right now is indeed social distancing, reduce the contacts, but vaccinate and boost as much as possible.
Liels paldies, mums ir pienācis laiks pēdējiem jautājumam.
This brings us to the last question, which will be asked in Zoom, so please do put on your headsets to hear the question. Artyoms Konohovs from the Latvian radio.
Hello, yes, Latvian radio, Artyoms Konohovs. I'll ask in English because I have a question for the President of Commission. Latvia is among those countries that is actually willing for the Schengen border code to be revised. And in order to include situation like the one we see now in Belarus, and sort of to distinguish between the, let's say, standard migration crisis and this type of hybrid attacks when people are being deliberately sent to the border. So what's your stance on this when the Commission, or if so, is planning to come up with any updates on the Schengen border codes? Yes, what's your agenda there? Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Before the end of the year, we are planning on revising the Schengen border code, and with the experience we have right now with the Belarus situation, we also will address this topic of a hybrid attack where people are instrumentalized by a state-sponsored hybrid attack, the way we see it right now. And indeed, we are working on the possibility to give the member states the option to have more flexibility, to care for people on our territory, so EU territory, to have proper procedures, of course in full light of the EU law and the international law, but to give in such a critical crisis situation the possibility to have registration points and to have more flexibility also what time is concerned to properly act and react.
Paldies visiem par dalību. Preses konference ir noslēgta.
Thank you. This concludes our press conference. Thank you all.